Hey guys, this is part 2 of my video about the Ibanez RG450EXB. So if you are installing a GE 1996T in a guitar and you're interested in getting the most out of the pullback range, or for pulling up on the bar, you know, then that's what this video is all about. And also there'll be some other tips and info regarding installing the Tremolo. Oh, also the video should be timestamped, so if you don't want to listen to me rattle on and want to skip around, you should be able to find the different topics down at the bottom. So I replaced the Tremolo with this cool Gotoh. Super awesome. Boing, boing. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to do really radical pullbacks on it without modifying the body of the guitar. So that's really what the video is basically about. But there is some other interesting info if you're putting a Gotoh in. Not everybody's going to want to yank the thing back to do, 5 half steps or whatever. But if you do, we're going to cover that. But let me point some things out real quick that'll be useful to anyone that's putting a Gotoh in one of these. Like any other tremolo arm, you can spin it until it starts to get tight. But in my case, it stopped right about here. And I like my arm to be, basically I want to be able to leave it and have it stay where I put it. So what you do is there's a little Allen screw that you tighten. It's like a little grub screw there at the collar on the base of the tremolo bar. And then I think there's like a plastic washer or two-piece washer assembly that goes around the bar there. Another thing to note is that the Gotoh typically comes with a 40mm block, which my understanding is that works fine, other than the fact that it sticks out of the guitar in the back just enough that you can't put the back plate on. So what I did was I got a 33mm block off of Amazon. I think it was like $7. I understand that some places do give you a choice of the block size with the Gotoh, but I got mine off of some rando seller on Amazon. Don't use the Gotoh springs. Originally, that was my plan because I heard they're, good springs or whatever. But this isn't an Ibanez spring, but it's the same size as an Ibanez spring. Notice how the Gotoh is shorter. What happened was, in order for me to balance the tremolo for the Gotoh, I had to screw the screws out pretty far. Now, fortunately, when I went to put this foam in here, which we'll talk about that in a minute, but when I went to put this foam in here, I decided I would just wiggle the screw around because nothing was attached to the claw. So I was like, oh, let me just try wiggling the screw and see if it moves very much. And they were like all over the place. It kind of felt like they were barely in there. So I realized that backing them out that much, they were like down, the claw was like down here. I realized that backing them out that much probably wasn't a great idea. So I switched back to the original Ibanez springs. And I would recommend that. It's super easy to handle as far as getting the trem on and off. Basically, all you have to do is pull the bar back, and then you can just pull these springs right off. Now, you can pull off you can pull them all off pretty easily when you have it pushed all the way back. Now, how far back it goes is going to depend on if you modify it or not. But either way, you can still do this. But what I wanted to show you, this is probably pretty common knowledge, but just in case you're not aware of it, the easiest way, especially the first spring, to get it back on is to take a screwdriver and hook it through here. Here we go. One thing to note is that on the Gotoh tremolo, these screws, these Allen doodads that tighten the blocks that hold the strings in. They're too long for the cavity. So what you have to do, I took the original, these are actually the ones from the Gotoh. So I just swapped them. I took the ones out of the Ibanez Tremolo and put them in here. So chances are, if you're putting a Gotoh in your guitar, in your Ibanez in particular, but I think it works for most things, you've done some research and you probably realize that you can't use the Gotoh studs and anchors in this guitar without drilling bigger holes. So if you want to upgrade your studs or just replace them, you know, maybe they're worn out, maybe the knife edges have dug into them, maybe you're just a purist and you want everything to be fresh, what you can do is get some all-parts Schaller Tremolo studs. They have the same thread as the original Ibanez stud. So if you see here, what this is the original Ibanez stud screwed into the anchor that came with the Schaller ones. So all you have to do is just pop your tremolo off like I was showing you before by pulling the springs out. I keep the springs screwed to the block because it makes it much easier to pull it out and put it back on without them flying everywhere. So, you know, you pop the 3 springs off, you gently pull it through the other side, springs and all, and then do your thing. You can unscrew, once the tremolo is off, you can unscrew the studs with your fingers. And, you know, if you want to, you can try and measure and see where they were before and put them back in the same place. I tried that, didn't work at all. Still had to manually adjust it to get it where I needed it, but you know, I did manage to get it there. Oh, another thing, the Schaller studs, interestingly, the insides of the holes aren't painted. So I just took the appliance epoxy and just took the brush without them on before I put them on the guitar and just dabbed in the holes and let it dry. And then any that gets on the top, you can just wipe it off. Now, in order to do the really big pullbacks, your action has to be kind of high. So just keep that in mind. So the main thing, the main thing I wanted to talk about with this tremolo is that the pullback range, at least in this particular guitar, what happened was when I was pulling back, it would only get, you know, like halfway down, not even into the cavity, and stop. So what I determined was that the arm holder on the other side was knocking up against the inside of the guitar. So what I did was I took a Dremel to it and dug out that area. Now that black dot is not what that black dot is. The way I figured out how deep to go with the Dremel. So what I did was I used Rust-Oleum appliance epoxy. I basically just painted the front of the tremolo arm there, and then I would pull the tremolo back, and then what it would do is mark the inside of the cavity, and that's where I knew how to drum, or where to Dremel. So that's just a black mark from basically when I got as deep as I needed it to go. That's where I stopped. Typically on an Ibanez you can normally pull back 5 half steps, so that's what I was basically trying to get it to do, and I did manage to get it to do that, so I didn't keep going. But you do want to be careful not to go too deep because you don't want to run into the tremolo studs, or the stud anchors, I should say. And that would be somewhere in this area here, basically. So You just don't want to go too crazy. And obviously it's going to be on the other side of the guitar, but this is just the general neighborhood on the opposite side where it's going to be, right here. For getting the trem out of the way, what I recommend is using a 9-volt battery. Let me put, and then that'll get it out of the way, so you can do whatever you need to do. As a matter of fact, I Dremeled it with the bar still on it. I just cocked it up like this and then was just very, very careful. The bits I used, I mainly used this one, which is pink stone, and this one, which is also pink stone, but it's just very worn. And I had another one that was similar to the first one that I showed you that has a, oh, here it is. It's on the Dremel. And I mentioned before that I had put the foam in the back of the guitar. The reason I did that was every time I would pull the bar back, this part would kind of clunk up against the wood. So I just took some thick black foam, just stuffed it under there. I mean, it's not actually that thick, it's more like this. But it's thick in the sense that it's very dense. So dense, thin foam, I should say. And I took all the springs off and put it under the claw intentionally, so when I pull back on it, but before it was kind of a clunking, and you'd feel it through the whammy bar. So that was my solution for that. So hopefully that gives you some idea of how deep it needs to be able to go. Now, it pulled back pretty fine before. I mean, you could get 3 or maybe 4, 3.5, 4 half steps out of it as it was. But I actually picked up this guitar specifically to tune it to E flat because I didn't want to do it with either any of my other couple Floyd guitars. And the song I got it to learn has a pretty big pullback. Wanted to make sure I could at least hit that note. So at least when I fail at the song, it won't be from not being able to pull the whammy bar back far enough. So, anyway, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I hope this video is helpful, and thanks for watching. Now, if you are installing a new tremolo, that means you're going to have to set up the intonation. So I got this thing called a Red Bishop accu-locator, and it comes with a nifty set of instructions in both English and Japanese. And as it indicates here, you can use it on a variety of different tremolos. Basically the way it works, this little hook thing here, which is adjustable, and you can move it and tighten it depending on your guitar. It goes around, if I can line this up so you can see, goes around the back of the microtuner. There we go. And then can't believe I'm doing this one-handed. Oh, check it out. And then it slides into the hole where the block is, and then you tighten it down, and then you're free to loosen the screw here to adjust the intonation. And then once the screw is loose, you can actually adjust it by turning this knob. And then the way I loosen the screw is I just kind of push the trem down and move the string aside and loosen it. And then you only want to loosen it slightly, though. If you loosen it too much, it'll make the saddle ride higher, and then then you won't get correct intonation. Now, some people have said they have issues with this staying on their guitar if you bump into it really hard, because you have to, when you're doing the intonation, when you're doing the screw, you have to put it between these two prongs here to do the loosening and the tightening. So if you're not careful, you can knock it off. But it's on there pretty good. All in all, I would say it's a pretty stable system, but depending on your guitar, I would exercise care. It's on there pretty good. Pull it off, it's not. Basically, it holds the tension so that this can be unscrewed, and then you can loosen it or tighten it to allow the saddle to move back and forth. And then when you're done, you just push the tremolo forward, release the tension, tighten down your screw, and test it, and then you're good to go. You just check it on the tuner.